Do you think being a snake is a bad thing or a good thing?
That was like literally something my grandmother said to me. Like, I think it's my eyes, but when she was dying, and had dementia, she told me that I looked like a snake, and she didn't seem to, like, she said it like confused, but it was just kind of like she was observing something. And I think what she meant was she was looking at my eyes, and my eyes are greenish brown, and it wasn't like much of an insult. So I put that in the story. And then I named the story that, and then I started thinking that these make sense. And a snake has all sorts of interesting meanings depending on your culture, how you want to look at it. And it just seemed like it fit. And like, who's the snake? Is it you, the person reading it, or are you calling somebody else it? Like, it just seemed like it fit thematically. So
Yeah, and I asked you in a binary way, but it's not actually a binary.
yeah, and snakes. I love snakes. Like, I have a tattoo of a snake that I got before I named the book
Wait, show it,
that.
show it a little more.
It's got a little snake here, and these are my West Virginia wildflowers that I
Uh,
got on there.
One thing that's so I in your book that I really am envious. I forget the difference between jealous and envious, but I envy that kind of like going out and wearing shorts and having I feel like if I had that power and that ability, I am I don't know what the fuck I would think I would have been very similar.
That's one thing that I have often thought is absurd is in terms of people that I know, I have basically no issues related to body or food. But I still have like such a fucked up relationship to my body and to food. Like, I think, like people my age, old millennials, young Gen X, like we had a bad culture to grow up in, but so many other people born in years. But yeah, like I have a relatively healthy relationship to my body and food, but it's still so twisted. We've done a number to ourselves of like,
Or it was done to us. I mean, it's
yeah.
hard look, if you look at like what all the what was the what the models was. I grew up with 17 magazine and
Yeah.
what that fucking was. I mean, we didn't see people of different sizes and all the messaging and you're fat, blah 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 blah. Anyway, does it change for you reading the work in front of like an audience, like it's like a bigger audience than just
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm gonna find out because I've read some of these stories here and there, but haven't, done readings with them as the book that's being promoted yet. So I might have a better answer to this in a month and a half. But it does certainly change them. Like, it feels like such a cool but weird splintering that most people don't get to experience that I'm really grateful for, but sometimes also feel like maybe I'm cheating myself in a way. I don't know. But just like there's you, there's the experiences you wrote about, there's the product, the actual book, there's the act of writing the product. There's the way you felt about it when you wrote it. There's the way it feels when you hold that book the first time in your hand and you're like, oh shit, I can't believe I put that in there. There's the way you feel about it years later. Like, it's such a strange way to deal with reality that is like a version of what everyone deals with if they're in a 12-step program, but is so much more complicated and feels like a gift, but also feels like, what am I doing to myself? Like, who in their right mind would do this too? So yeah, it's something that I, have been thinking about ever since I first started publishing books. It's just this weird experience that is writing about your life, changing it becoming something that people can hold and buy. Just wild.
but then you kind of commodify yourself having to get up there and be a representation of, and whatever, and be available for whatever people are going to be projecting. And
Yeah. And like I didn't, I chose the name Juliet Escoria out of necessity because I was teaching at a religious university with a morality clause in my contract. But I didn't realize that I was like creating a persona too. And I think that's healthy to an extent, but it's just like weird how you can do something that feels so personal, but then it becomes capitalism. And people are staring at you and making judgments about you, and your worst nightmares coming true, which is they actually all are looking at you.
Yeah, but I also really think that if the setting is right, like that's what I loved about when I read in New York and also in Baltimore. It was about coming and supporting artists. Like there was this
Yeah.
overarching, it wasn't about capitalism. Like that wasn't the organizing spirit. That wasn't the organizing principle. And this community had like in Baltimore um that this organization of people that you're a part of have created where it's like, no, we are who we are and we this transfers with us. And of course, there's always that other awareness and that fear, but people, when it's a dominant, uh, when it's not about being cool or bullying or whatever, people rise to that. And when
Yeah.
they
Yeah, and
hear,
what you're saying is like when people talk shit about readings, I get so mad sometimes because it's like you're going to the wrong readings then because a reading can be like the best part of literature, publishing a book, which is you are engaging eyes to eyes, like body to body, with people who are there because they love books. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you go to a reading because you have a bunch of people like posturing, but when it does happen, it's amazing. Like it's one of the greatest parts of being a writer is you're like, wow, like this, I was a part of something like really cool today, and I feel, good stuff about the other readers, the people who hosted it, the audience, and that stuff. So it can be one of the best parts of being a writer, I think.
and I think for writers who I talk to people who are musicians and I was talking to Jeff from Thursday and
Yeah.
he gets to have the best of both worlds. He gets to get out of the isolation of writing and be like when I came out to see him when he was playing here and that connection with a large audience and your bandmates, not being alone with where we are so fucking isolated, you know, doing the work and then it's to have that uh that moment of grace where you can connect with other people is just I really got addicted to it and craved it and it's something that definitely um drives my wanting to finish my book because I I like sitting there and hearing from people what they felt.
I get so nervous at them. I've gotten
Before, I think it's the before, the anticipation.
before like the 2 hours before them is like I'm just like this, why did I do this? I hate readings. And then they happen, and especially like the Hidden Palace one that I did with Jeff and Chelsea Hodson and Scott. Like that one was incredible. Like I was just so in awe of Scott and Chelsea and Jeff and Ashley and Joey, and like the crowd was so receptive. Great reading. But that half hour before, I was so fucking nervous, and like I hate how I act when I'm nervous too. Like I don't think other people know how awfully nervous I am, but that one I was like really uncomfortable, like right before it started. And then after it was like, well, this was great. So I think that's funny how I always behave that way at readings, which is the short time before I'm just like a weird nervous freak. And then after, it's like, wow, it's so nice to be here.
A podcast just came out where I didn't even remember that I'd done the podcast before when I was planning to go to New York. And I was just talking about how freaked out I was and it took me back to like, oh yeah, I didn't want to go to New York. I didn't want, why am I doing this? What the fuck? And how horrible I am the day, like really, it's the worst type of thing. And then what happens, it's like getting out of myself, which it's like this show is on, and it's it's sort of like, it reminds me in when you're telling your story. Like I remember when I would be the speaker and I was very much in the, oh, I'm going to speak, I'm going to share, and and then this other thing takes over, and you get to be that gift of, this is what happened,
Maybe I need to apply 12-step logic to reading logic because at a 12-step meeting, I feel like that's what makes it an acceptable way to talk about is not mention what 12-step group it is. I don't know if that's actually true, but like at a 12-step meeting, if I feel like I'm like trying to be clever or funny or something, then I'll ask like, let what I say here please be in service of the group and not in service of me. Maybe
right.
I need to tell myself that before reading of let me be in service of the group, not in service of me. Maybe it'll be less nervous if I do that.
Thank you so much, and definitely catch Juliet Escoria when she's reading. I will be posting like fuck about wherever she's going to be being.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's was such an honor.